I breathe up room, no seed biting, never bites. Fast water dribbling in the girls down with the guys. Spin now see black, leave right, red fire. OMG, Mac 4, Robert C, Gallon Neck Night. Hot stove talk, Robert C, bringing the hype. EC's alive, plus trust under those in my city life. White. Queens got the dreams united. On the rag, trump out, bring me stack. Night and under that chocolate flag. Smack that home out the park. Fuck the deafening black. Side game time, Robin CP time to ignite. Under NYC skies, we fight the good fight. Remains cheer in the orange, we unite. Mets forever. I'm fit to be in sight. Mets riding high. Energy like a live wire. Queen City chance. Passion never tires. Grand slam dreams and paces over fast. Holding it steady, cause we know we gonna last. We the kings of the field, time to ignite. Under NYC skies, we fight the good fight. Remain cheer in the orange, we unite. Mets forever, our victory in sight. All hearts ignite like NYC stars. Robin CP, guiding even through scars. Queens got the glow, city anthem flows.
What's up, Mets fans? Welcome back to episode 25 of the Mets Hot Stove right here on the channels and on X. Hopefully everybody is getting ready for playoff football Sunday. But of course, we got to talk about our New York Mets before any of that goes down. And we're going to get right to it just as we talk to Chris. What's up, buddy?
Sunday fun day. We're here to talk Mets baseball. Hope everybody is having a great weekend, great end to their weekend. Football should be fun. Unfortunately, neither of our teams, the Cowboys or the Giants, are in it, Rob. But you know what? It's going to be a good day, and it's always a good day to talk Mets baseball. We got plenty to talk about, plenty of players, free agency madness, even though it's January 12th and we haven't had anything to talk about, minus just report after report after report. We're here to break it down. Let's do it.
Yeah, we got exactly a month until pitchers and catchers report for the Mets. And there's still no signings that we actually want or talk about or try to think that we can get somebody. But there is some news that came out as, of course, there's got to be a typo. I spelled Alonso wrong, but who cares, right? But that's okay. That's why we do this stuff, because we like mistakes. And listen, guys, we know the process of MLB free agency is kind of embarrassing, to be quite honest with you, right? They have a winter meetings just so they can have a little vacation and, have some dinners and some drinks with each other. And that's basically it. And not a lot really did happen during the winter meetings, Juan Soto and a couple of others, but nothing really hasn't happened much big time in regards to right after the winter meetings. The Yankees made a couple of moves. Couple other teams did, but nothing really that big, as the big free agents are still out there, and most of them are still named right here in the topics. And we're going to start with the first one, and as reported by Ken Rosenthal yesterday, which I think became a shocker to a lot of people. And Mets fans, as soon as they hear short-term high AAV, they get the blood boiling a little bit. They get a little excited, and I think most of us did. As I think I sent Chris a little portray of what the background for the pregame show might be, and he saw my lineup, my wishful lineup, and it kind of added one of these guys in there. And when it comes to Santander and Flaherty, they're options now. And I'm leaning away from the Alex Bregman situation because of the fact that the Alonso situation probably is going to come to a head at some point. They're going to figure it out. They both got the same amount of years. The opt-outs might be a little different in each other's offer, but the money is probably a little higher from the Alonso offer that they offered to the Mets. But when it comes to Santander and Flaherty, especially Flaherty for that matter, because Roki Sasaki, if he doesn't become a Met, Flaherty can definitely be an option in his rotation, and I'll be on board with that. But Santander, man, if you can get Santander here with Alonso, I mean, that's one of the better lineups in baseball. I think it's hard to say otherwise, as you got 1 through 7 that is, deep and strong and a home run laden lineup, along with guys that are two switch hitters in the lineup with Lindor and Santander, and so much more that you can look at with this lineup. You got average with Juan Soto and a couple of other guys. You got a tremendous amount of power in this lineup. But with these two guys, possibly, according to Ken Rosenthal, would be would be okay. I'm not going to say they would be happy, but they would be okay and settle for a short-term high AAV deal, which seems like the free agents that are left are unfortunately going to find themselves with short-term high AAV deals, and that goes right into the favor of David Stearns and the New York Mets with these players. Chris, what do you think about Santander and Flaherty of the possibility in that Ken Rosenthal report?
I dropped a video about it earlier this morning, right smack like first thing in the morning on my channel about this Ken Rosenthal report. And again, like you just said, this plays right into the New York Mets' hands, because as soon as you hear short-term high AAV, that is right up the David Stearns and New York Mets alleyway right there. This would be tremendous. Now, I will say, because we do have to talk about the payroll as it pertains to the arbitration values that are now allocated into the New York Mets payroll for 2025. We always talk about, what's going to get the New York Mets to that third apron and then above that third apron as it pertains to the luxury tax. Well, I was looking at Spotrac's projections right now at this current very moment, because again, all of this factors into the contracts that we're talking about, whether we can afford Pete Alonso or Santander, or Pete Alonso and Santander, right? It's and versus or, because then you're still also have to allocate, maybe another starting pitcher like Jack Flaherty or a Tanner Scott, who we'll get into here in just a second as we progress through these topics today for you all. But right now, as it stands, the Mets are just a tad bit above $258 million as it pertains to the Spotrac projections, right? Again, you can take a mil or two, either way, but it's right around $258 million. The actual projection right now for the MLB in 2025 is around $241 million as that sort of cap. Going above and beyond and hitting that third apron. I know nobody wants to talk about it, and this is kind of boring, but it's good background information to have as we get into the salaries of what Santander and or Flaherty could be making with this short-term outlook. But $60 million on top of 241 is, if my math serves me correctly, $301 million. So that means the Mets have just about $43 million to play with if they want to stay under that $301 million. Now, again, this is Steve Cohen talking about. And if you're already losing the draft pick, by hitting that second apron, that second wave of luxury tax, then maybe he's just like, listen, why don't we just blow right past the third one, because we don't have anything to save here at this point, minus the tax penalty, right? Steve Cohen can say that. I'm a little bit skeptical if that's the actual outlook and that we're going to be seeing and talking about, but it very well could be with Steve Cohen. But this is so perfect because, again, we've been talking about Alonso, and we'll talk about him here in just a second as it pertains to the offer that now him and Boris have to the Mets. But Santander, situationally, and I think you've been echoing this sentiment, there's a lot more versatility on the table with Santander rather than Pete Alonso if we're talking about an or situation. Now, I would love both of these guys in the lineup, right? Alonso and Santander, in addition to Soto, Lindor, Vientos, Nimmo, and then the rest of the lineup. Let's get ready for 2025. I'm ready to go to war with that lineup all day long, all day, every day. But if it's an or, if you have to choose one of these guys, Santander is consistently approaching 30 home runs in his career. Last year, he had a career year with 44 home runs. The home run ball is there, but it's not as great. The power potential is not as great as Pete Alonso's power potential, as we've seen throughout the course of his first 6 years as a New York Met. That is a given. But where Santander can actually fit into this roster is not playing first base on a consistent basis, although he has first base experience. But I just also, released a video yesterday as sort of a snippet of our discussion about Brandon Nimmo as a DH and moving Brandon Nimmo potentially into a hybrid DH role. Well, Santander plays corner outfield, and he's also a DH type bat too. So you could also platoon Santander and Nimmo on any given occasion over the course of 162 games and be perfectly fine. Now, that doesn't solve the third base situation, because in this scenario, ideally, you'd have Vientos moving over to first base, and that's a whole different discussion within itself. But again, I'm a little bit skeptical that it's going to be Santander and Alonso, but if it is and Steve Cohen is ready to spend that money and he gives David Stearns the okay, I think that a lot of naysayers in this fan base, right? And I tweeted this out, and I know you quoted it, Rob, on each of our X accounts. People who look at this rotation and think, man, this isn't good enough. If you have that type of lineup out there with Santander and Alonso going with the rest of the personnel, I'm sorry. I don't really care what happens to the rotation at that point. I'm ready to see what happens in the first half, and then we can talk about adding to the rotation at the deadline. But as it pertains to Jack Flaherty, I'm all on board for Jack Flaherty on a short-term deal.
Sure.
This could be the missing piece. Not needing to trade any of your prospects if David Stearns isn't ready to do that. We're both on board with him trading prospects if he finds it within himself to do that. But if he doesn't want to do that, okay. Jack Flaherty is not Roki Sasaki. I think we all know Roki Sasaki. At least we should assume he's not coming to the Mets. Yes, there's an off chance he comes to the Mets, but it's not likely. I'm predicting he goes out west, whether it's the Giants, whether it's the Padres, whether it's the Dodgers, it doesn't matter. I don't think he's going to be in a Mets uniform nor a Yankees uniform. No, Jack Flaherty is no Roki Sasaki, and he's no Corbin Burns. He's no Max Fried. But he is a dependable arm, right? At least in the last 2 years with his body of work. And if he's now willing to take a short-term deal, yeah, he had an abysmal 2023 season followed by a really good 2024 campaign with the Dodgers. This allows the Mets to see if he can replicate that type of success. And he's only 28 years old. So this actually makes sense for him to compile 2 back-to-back fantastic seasons and then potentially go back out onto the market at age 29 next offseason to get his long-term deal. So I understand a lot of where Jack Flaherty is coming from and his willingness to take the short-term deal. And I think that this would be perfect because, again, you don't have to rely on a Tyler McGill. You don't have to rely on a Griffin Canning or even a Paul Blackburn. You add Jack Flaherty at the top, move Senga and Manaea down, and then you're ready to rock with Peterson, Montas, Clay Holmes to finish out your rotation. This is the perfect scenario. And again, I understand that Jack Flaherty is not as flashy of a name. I think we can all agree on that. But he's exactly what the New York Mets need right now to at least shore up some of the question marks that remain in this rotation. For me, at least. That's my opinion.
Yeah, and that's the thing, and that's the whole point of all of this with the short-term deal situation is that we know Stearns likes it. We know he loves it. I mean, if he can get everybody on a short-term high AAV deal, he would. I mean, he would have probably even loved to have done that with Juan Soto if he was actually in control of that situation. But when you're talking about the or factor of Santander or Pete Alonso, you better bring in Flaherty and you better bring in Tanner Scott because you need to solidify your rotation, make it better, and make your bullpen, I mean, if not dominant, close to it. And Tanner Scott would bring that along with a couple of other arms that he can throw into the bullpen. I think it's more likely that Santander and Alonso is more likely, especially if they're both going to come on a short-term deal. I think it benefits both of them. I don't know if Santander will want to opt out. I don't see that as beneficial for him when he had a career year. I mean, could he have that career year again? Sure, but I don't think he's going to risk it. I think he wants at least a three-year deal, probably for a good high AAV. And then if he wants to go back on the market in 3 years, we'll see what happens with that. But again, that's not our concern. It's just a matter of would he want to opt out in that contract, which I don't see that. With Flaherty, yeah, because he's 28 years old and, he can have an opt-out after the first season, second season, and he's only 29, 30 years old. That's a huge get if he has a really good season. And that fits right into the Mets' hand when it comes to, good, have a great year for us. If you want to get $37 million a year for 5-6 years, go right ahead and, we'll find somebody else. But that's the key here. Is this short-term deal? Again, Ken Roosevelt didn't mention teams or anything like that when it comes to, short-term deal with these guys and who would be interested. More teams would be interested. Of course they would be. The reason why Santander, Flaherty, Alonso, for that matter, are still on the market is because they were probably looking for 5+ years in a contract. Obviously. That's why they're still out there. But nobody's budging. And of course, teams are going to come back to the pack and be like, oh, short-term deal. Now we can have a conversation. Now, if this is true that the 4 years, $82 million that the Blue Jays offered Santander, I mean, that's probably the highest amount of years he's going to get from anybody. So if he's not willing to take that to go to Toronto, he wants to go elsewhere and wouldn't mind taking a short-term deal to go elsewhere. He doesn't want to go to Toronto because that deal would have been signed already. If he was concerned about the years, he would get the 4 years guarantee and 19 million dollars per year. And he's not going to Toronto because, I mean, you would think he would have signed that deal already. So he ain't going to Toronto. So knock Toronto off the list. And he's not going to go take a short-term deal to go to Toronto if he can get that 4-year deal guaranteed right away. So he's not going to
something, Rob? Yeah, I'm sorry to cut you off. I think Teoscar Hernandez screwed outfielders in the future, and Anthony Santander is the first one that he kind of not screwed over, but like he set the precedent for in terms of going down the short-term deal route. Because you know what? Whether Santander wants to do it or not, whether he has multiple long-term deals on the table or not outside of Toronto Blue Jays, you know, people see the Teoscar Hernandez route that he went. 1-year deal, performed well, and then got rewarded with a nice 3-year deal from the Dodgers. And other outfielders in that same realm of age, 30, 31 years old, are like, I can just do that if it means to go, that I can go where I want to go, which is not Toronto. You know what I mean? I just want to say that.
Yeah, and that's the thing that is so interesting when it comes to this, because there is a 4-year deal on the table for Toronto for Anthony Santander. So again, this is a situation where if Santander and Flaherty, and this is Ken Rosenthal talking this, you know, if it was Andy Martino or some other, you know, snob reporter that doesn't know their ass from their elbow, you know, Ken Rosenthal has been pretty good, right? He doesn't put shit out there every day like, you know, the guys I just mentioned, because they want some clicks, right? Ken Rosenthal put something out there, it's probably factual. So why is Flaherty is kind of on a different spectrum, in my opinion, because Flaherty, who knows what been offered to him or not. Clearly a long-term deal hasn't been there, because why would he be in on these short-term deals or possibly on these short-term deals? Santander is more of like eye-opening, because it just seemed like he was going to end up in Toronto at some point because they have the highest amount of years. Because I think if there was another team outside of Canada, which there isn't many, there's only one, but there's many other teams outside of Canada that offered him a 4-year deal, he probably would have been there already. So Toronto probably has that only 4-year deal on the table, and he clearly isn't going there unless they probably offer him 6-7-year deals, which I don't see them doing. So is the Mets in on these guys? Who knows, right? I think Flaherty is going to happen, or at least going to pick up steam when Roki Sasaki makes a decision. And because if the Mets get Roki Sasaki, you could get Flaherty, but you don't necessarily have to. And then we can really talk about what are the Mets going to do with the other 2 bats. Is it Santander and Alonso? But with Santander, I think it's more of an option for a lot more teams now. And that might hurt the Mets, but it also might put the Mets as the favorite if they are. Because they are looking for, if they were willing to give 2 years to Teoscar Hernandez, and 2 years, I think it was to Jock Peterson, but they didn't want to increase the offer, they probably would go 3 years on Santander. I don't think they were comfortable with 4 years, but I think they would go 3 years on Santander when he is a guy, like you said, he is versatile. He can play the corner outfields. He can DH. He can play first base, right? That goes back to our or scenario, Alonso or Santander. I think it's more likely that you would get a Santander Alonso than you probably would Santander and Flaherty. I'm sorry.
Well, I was just going to say, we also like, because I know a lot of people still want to talk about Vlad Jr. So like if the Mets, if we're thinking about it in a terms of if the Mets really want to pursue Vlad Jr. next offseason, then I would probably say it's going to be Santander or Alonso. But again, I don't like to operate under that sort of realm of it being possible, right? We can't operate under the assumption that, you know, the Mets are going to go full throttle after Vlad Jr. So it would make sense to go after both of those bats for sure, 100%. And yeah, I agree as it pertains to, so if we're talking about like, let's just throw out some numbers here, right? You said 3 years. I would say I guess the 3-year deal would make sense with an opt-out somewhere in there for Santander if he really wants it, presumably after year 1, if not, just let the contract ride out. So what would you think a fair offer is for 3 years for Santander, money-wise? Do
See,
you
it's a
think
tough
it's like
one.
a
Like you
Teoscar
said,
Hernandez thing?
Hernandez screwed him. So, screwed a lot of outfit. Oh, man. Well, can you say he's better than Teoscar Hernandez?
No, you can't.
That's exactly. I agree with that. So, what did Teoscar Hernandez get per year? Like 21,
I think
22,
22, around
22
22.
million a year? You know what? If I can throw an opt-out in there in 3 years, I give him a little bit more money. I would give him $24-25 million only because there's an opt-out in there. And it benefits the Mets. If he has a great year, he's going to opt out. If he doesn't, you're going to keep him around for another 2 years, or if there's multiple opt-outs. But I would do 3 years, 25 per. So what is that? 3 for 75, and give him an
75.
opt-out. I would give him an opt-out after the first year, so it can benefit both parties, where he can get out of a contract knowing that there ain't many outfielders on the market next year. He don't have to worry about Juan Soto or Teoscar Hernandez. He can worry about him being one of the key outfielders on the market, and he could probably get that long-term deal if he has a really good year, and it benefits the Mets in 2025. So, yeah, I would go 3 for 75, even though he's not better than Teoscar Hernandez.
But and so 3 for 75 is fair. I was thinking maybe like 3 for 72 at 24 million per year, because again, the difference between 23 and 24 and 25 million is actually astronomical. It is astronomical. If the Mets are thinking about that $301 million third threshold, if they are.
Sure.
You know what I mean? Because we just named $43 million being the sweet spot before they hit that point. If you're going to give Santander 25 per, at least 25 in 2025, that leaves you with $18 million left to play with, which is not getting you Flaherty. It's not getting you Pete Alonso. And it might not even get you Tanner Scott. You know what I mean? So that's what I'm saying. Like, no matter how you cut it out, and the same thing goes for Pete Alonso, right? Sure. That's why I think they're going to blow past $301 million.
Well, that's the thing.
Blow past it.
They can lowball every offer if they want, and they're still good. Like they can get a good deal on Alonso, Santander, Flaherty, Tanner Scott, like 2 out of the 4, or even 3 out of the 4, and still, even with the high AVs, like they're going to still go over that, even if they don't want to. They're going to have to, because they have to fill out the roster. So, like, unless they completely just do Alonso and that's it. And again, if they only do Alonso, again, it's not making me excited at all. I'm sorry. Like, I know Met fans will go goo goo gaga for him because, they kiss Alonso's ass, but I'm not going to be excited about it at all. To be quite honest with you, I like Alonso back with the Juan Soto edition, but I don't feel like it's enough, especially if you're not doing more with the rotation. And that's why I think they're going to have to blow over this. And I'm not saying, Stearns wouldn't, but I don't think Steve Cohen cares. And I think Stearns is probably knows that. And if he has to, he will. But again, until he does it, I don't know. Like,
yeah,
that's the issue with Stearns. Like, that's the issue.
Unless we're talking about deferments, which the Mets could also utilize, but again, it would still be hard. Because they're not going to defer an entire contract, right? Just to stay under that. But also, if we're talking about Anthony Santander, and we're talking about another corner outfielder that has the capability of either moving Nimmo over to DH spot or just being the DH himself, you don't need Starling Marte at that point. You do not need Starling Marte under any circumstances, because Santander is a switch hitter, right and left-handed. So why would you need Starling Marte? And that is what Starling Marte is making. I want to say just under $20 million per year, somewhere around there, 18 maybe, somewhere around there. It doesn't matter, in the ballpark. So, like, again, you would presumably want to find a trade partner or just buy that contract out, just outright. So I don't know, man. This is a revolving door of outfield scenario.
Well, that's the thing. Like we know they're trying to trade Marte, right? That has been established, right? We don't know about Jeff McNeil's situation. It seems like they're willing to keep Jeff McNeil. And keep the younger guys, at least one on the bench and the others in the minors. But it's Marte, they're trying to get something for him, and they're going to pay that. And that's what I'm saying. They're going to pay Marte's bulk of his contract to get rid of him to make room. And that's why the Teoscar Hernandez offer kind of was like, okay, even if they move Marte, there's still abundance of outfielders here. And this is where we talked about the other day about Brandon Nimmo. There's a big chance that Nimmo cannot play the field every single day, if at all. Like, there's concern there because you don't go after these outfielders, right? Juan Soto is Juan Soto, right? You go after Juan Soto. I don't care who's your outfield. Going after Teoscar Hernandez, trying to get Jock Peterson, and you would think the Mets would be in on Anthony Santander when it's basically close to similar value money-wise for Anthony Santander. Clearly something's going on with the Brandon Nimmo situation. It's not just even about Starlin Marte anymore, because obviously the writing's on the wall with Starlin Marte if you bring in a Santander. But I think it's more about the Nimmo situation that I think it's a telling sign that the Mets are going after outfielders here that can play the outfield every single day. And Nimmo has to be an issue, because the last time we heard he wasn't running. There was major issues with his feet with the plantar fasciitis, and who knows what other injuries he had. Like, there's a concern there. And this guy's on the contract for 6 more years? Like, we paid him as a center fielder, now he's a left fielder, and you might be paying him for the next 6 years to be a DH. So, which is fine. I mean, it doesn't matter. As long as you can keep him healthy and get that bat in the lineup, I think we'll be okay. But I think the possibility that Brandon Nimmo, and what we talked about the other day on the hot stove, if he is going to be a DH, and the Mets believe that that's where he has to be to keep him healthy, you have to get somebody that can play there every day. You can't put Tyrone Taylor there or even Starlin Marte there. It doesn't work. It doesn't make your team better. Santander makes your team better. And I think that's what they were trying to do with Teoscar Hernandez and Jock Peterson. Now, Jock Peterson isn't a very good outfielder. Teoscar Hernandez is decent. And Santander is not a great outfielder, but he's above average. So, and when you got Siri at center field, I think you're going to be okay with the gaps. You just got to make them patrol the lines and straight up. So, I think the situation with Nimmo is probably more telling. And again, Ken Rosenthal, I just want to make this clear for everybody that's listening or watching. Santander, there's no connection with the Mets as of yet. Rosenthal didn't bring up any team, so I want to make that clear. Other than the 4 years that Toronto offered for $82 million, there hasn't been teams named from Ken Rosenthal in that report. So I just wanted to make that clear before everybody thinks that we're talking that the Mets are officially in on them. We don't know that yet. It just makes sense that they would be with their prior approach of going after Hernandez and Jock Peterson. It just makes sense to do so if it's going to be a short-term deal.
Yeah, no, I agree with you 100%. And then also, even to go beyond just Brandon Nimmo, I don't think he's going to be a full-fledged DH. I think that there's going to be – I'm confident that Nimmo is going to be healthy. I'm not 100% confident, but I have some confidence in that. Some. But I will say it makes sense to at least DH him for a handful of games in 2025 to just keep him off of his feet, right? It makes total sense, and that's kind of what we've been talking about. And even Alex Verdugo, right? The Teoscar Hernandez, like all these reports in the Mets' interest in the corner outfielder, these outfielders, it's making sense and setting the tone for that being the case. Now, we also forget that Tyrone Taylor had a procedure, I believe, on his elbow as well to begin this offseason. He had an umbilical hernia, something of that nature on his elbow. I'm not sure if that was on his throwing elbow or not. I'm assuming that it is, but that's also a concern for the New York Mets. It's a 2-month recovery process, and I think we're just about at that 2 months, but you don't know how that's going to heal up after that kind of procedure. So there is some concerns in this outfield. I know Jose Siri is healthy. He's playing in the league right now, and we just saw him hit a home run, but he got hit in the hand, I believe it was, on a pitch like a couple weeks ago, or some injury concern on his hand. Again, like, stuff happens all the time, so you need to set yourself up for the most amount of success. And if you're going to, if that's the case with Taylor, with Nimmo, with Siri, are we really going to put stock into Starling Marte, who has shown no ability to stay healthy as a backup option? Because if Starling Marte is entrusted in that scenario, in that role, and he also goes down with an injury, all hell's going to break loose, Rob. all hell's gonna break loose.
Oh yeah, I'm just gonna close my stream down because like I don't even want to deal with it anymore. Like that would be nuts. Like, look, if Marte was healthy and because he's a clutch hitter, there's no doubt about that, right? He came up big in the playoffs for us. At the end of the year, he was clutch with his bat, but he can't stay on the field, right? I mean, could you always DH Marte if you really needed to? Sure, absolutely. If you're gonna keep him. And if Nimmo can play left field and you don't get Santander and you just bring back Alonso, I would DH Marte. I would keep that bat in the lineup because I like his bat and you might be able to keep him healthy. But yeah, I agree with you. Like, it's just leading up to the Mets probably going after Santander. And Flaherty, I think, is a possibility if the Mets don't land Sasaki. I think that's going to happen over the next couple of days because Flaherty knows that he's one of the last, I would say, would you say top pitching free agents on the market after Burns and Fried? He's kind of the next tier. And with Sasaki, obviously above him at this moment, he's not going to sign until Sasaki signs because there's going to be teams that lose out on Sasaki and they're going to need a pitcher, right? I mean, the Yankees are trying to get rid of a pitcher in Stroman. So they're not going to bring in Flaherty. So, they're out. Maybe the Red Sox, who are looking for another pitcher, might go after
the Orioles are very strong contenders for Flaherty, a reunion there.
With the short-term possibility, yeah, I would think the Orioles would do that. It would be funny because he pitched there.
He did in 2023, and he was bad.
Exactly. So it's like weird. But, yeah. But it is what it is at this point. The fact of the matter is, just to be clear to everybody, before we head to the next topic, Santander, Rosenthal's report didn't bring up the Mets or any team for that matter in on Anthony Santander or Jack Flaherty when it comes to the short-term deals. He was just bringing up that they can possibly take a short-term deal and they could be, they would be happy with a short-term deal. And obviously, when you hear short-term high AAV, you always got to bring up the Mets because that's their cup of tea right now when it comes with David Stearns and short-term high AAV deals. Yep. So, Pete Alonso, here we go again. Why not? Pete Alonso camp offered the Mets a 3-year deal with multiple opt-outs. Again, if you just do a quick math, 3-year deal with multiple opt-outs means first year opt-out, second year opt-out. It kind of opened up my eyes, and I know we did individual live streams when this news came out later that day, that the 3-year deal for $90 million the Mets offered. Now, I was trying to pick it apart a little bit. Maybe there wasn't any opt-outs in that deal, considering that that Alonso offered the Mets 2 opt-outs in his own deal. We don't know the number with that offer from Alonso's camp. But obviously it's 3 years, $30 million. There was no indication that the Mets had an opt-out in that offer. We thought there would be, considering that it's a short-term deal and, Vladimir Guerrero's situation. But because Alonso's camp offered 3 years with multiple opt-outs, I want to get your take on this, Chris. Do you think the Mets didn't have an opt-out in that contract? And why do you believe Pete Alonso offered this Mets a quote-unquote exclusive contract only to the Mets with the 3-year and opt-outs?
I mean, you can take a look at it that way. I'm not really sure I took a look at it that way. I thought the discrepancy was with the AAV between Boris and the Mets $30 million.
Do you think that's a major issue, though?
I think so. I don't think the Mets would think twice about giving him an opt-out. I don't think that's their concern. I don't.
But why would $5 million or $7 million more per AAV matter when it's a short-term deal anyway with opt-outs? You know what I'm saying?
Well, because they're already giving him $30 million, which is pretty generous, to be honest with you. I mean, $30 million AAV is already generous. So it's kind of disrespectful to even come at, the Mets with anything higher than that. 31, 32, okay, but $5 to $7 million more. At that point, it's principle of the matter.
I agree. That might have pissed off the Mets, but when they didn't care about the AAV with basically anybody, as long as they get a short-term deal, the way it seems, they've done it before. So why don't they just do it again? I don't see $5 to $7 million as a huge gap when it's the opt-outs, where I even said on my show the other day that I don't think the opt-outs were an issue for the Mets. I think if Pete Alonso would have came and says, hey, I want multiple opt-outs in this 3-year deal, they would have probably done it. them holding back for $5 to $7 million. I know Pete Alonso's not even. I don't even think Pete Alonso's worth $30 million, to be quite honest with you.
Right.
But to be the $5 to $7 million, I think, unless they're very serious about staying under that third luxury tax, then I can see why that $5 to $7 million matter. But if they're not, just get the deal done. Like, because I think it's stupid, in my opinion. And again, I'm not the biggest Pete Alonso fan. You know that I don't think that he's as good as everybody or Met fans portray him. $5 to $7 million is not the end of the world unless you're really serious about staying under that third luxury tax, just in case you need to make deals at the deadline if they're thinking about that. But again, if that's the case, just sign Anthony Santander, go get Flaherty and go get Tanner Scott, and you can put Santander at first base and go from there. Like, why waste time anymore? Because it's getting stupid at this point. Where, Pete, if you want to be a Met, you could take that 3 for $90. And if I'm the Mets, I would even think about looking at his deal. To be quite honest, I don't care what the issue, whatever, even if it's close to what they offered, I would be like, you're going to come at me with this when I gave you a generous offer, another fair deal, by the way. This is 2 offers that are extremely fair, 7 for $158 and now 3 for $90. 2 fair deals that the Mets did not have to do. They could have easily went $24-25 million easily in this latest offer. And they were also giving you $2 to $3 million more than a qualifying offer last year when they offered you that 7 for $158. So they've been generous and fair for a guy who's had 2 down seasons in regards to Pete Alonso's career. So he's slowly declining, and they're offering you more money. So if I'm the Mets, I'd pull out and go to Anthony, and this could be possible. They could pivot to Santander just because of that short-term possibility now and save $10 million per year.
They could very well do that. But again, like I said on my live stream when we talked about Alonso, is that I really do think that this is the case, that they are in agreement on the years, and the opt-outs is that's perfect. I don't think that those 2 sides and those 2 characteristics and traits of a contract are the problem right now. I think the difference in what Scott Boras is asking for, maybe $34 million for Pete Alonso per season, hell, maybe even 35, versus the Mets staying firm at 30. And they're going to have to find some sort of just perfect match right in between that value. I don't know if you saw this, but Will Salmon of The Athletic is projecting Pete Alonso's deal to be 3 years worth $93, I believe, $0.3 million. So that's $31.3 million per season. A little bit above that $30 million mark that we're talking about, but less than, 34, 35.
Sure.
Because Boras is aiming for the moon. I mean, he's already got, he's already playing into the Mets' hands, right? With coming down from a 6-year deal or 7-year deal to go back down to 3. And so, I mean, maybe he's a little bit prideful, and maybe he's trying to save face because he knows that he screwed Pete Alonso over at this point, right? And this is the best, the next best thing. So again, Scott Boras works in mysterious ways, and yeah, he has gotten a lot of his clients premier situations and premier dollar values and contracts. But the way that he handled this Pete Alonso situation, again, guaranteed money left on the table last offseason, betting on himself because they wanted more. They wanted 200 plus, and that gamble failed. And they realized that. And I still think, again, the Mets, their backs aren't against the wall. It's Alonso's back that's against the wall at this point. So I do think that they are, and there's something to be said too of like, why are they only offering the New York Mets this value right here? Can you let's just take a step back. I said this on my live stream very blatantly, right? I said the Mets or Pete Alonso needs the Mets more than the Mets need Pete Alonso. I stay firm on that, especially given the whole Santander situation and him still being out there. Same thing with Alex Bregman, although we haven't heard anything from Alex Bregman and the Mets and that connection. Can you imagine if Pete Alonso takes a 3-year deal with the Angels and he has no protection in that lineup, and he's also taking a 3-year deal worth an opt-out, trying to get back onto the market? with how he looked this past season in 2024 on sliders down and away, right? In that lineup, and then you go over to LA, come on. It would be hysterical.
Be careful talking about protection now. Met fans were going to get on you because he's never had protection
I
in the
agree.
Met
Yeah.
lineup, even though he was supposed to be the protection, right? But
Listen,
if he takes a 3-year deal and goes somewhere else, he never wanted to be a Met. So all those Met jerseys that have Alonso on the back, burn them because they're a waste of time. That's a fact because he never wanted to be a Met. And he already turned down 2 offers already. So does he really want to be a Met here? 2 fair offers. So let's not act like he actually wants to be a Met here, okay? The reason why he offered a deal to the New York Mets, because there's nothing out there. The Angels probably offered him a 2-year deal, maybe even a 1-year deal for a high AAV. So the fact that he isn't getting what he wants and giving that exclusive offer to the Mets, don't give me that, oh, he wants to be a Met, that's why he did that. No, because he had 2 opportunities to do so. And there is a possibility he offered that exclusive deal to the Mets because the Mets pulled that 3 years for 90 offer. That's the other possibility that not a lot of people are talking about. They could have pulled that offer after he might have said no, because why else offer it when it's all right? Let's say if the money is a couple of $1 million more, it's not that much difference. So it might be on his part, but like, hey, let's offer the Mets something similar that they offered me that they pulled, because all I'm getting from the Angels or the Giants a 1 or 2 year deal, not worth the trouble. Because it doesn't benefit Pete Alonso. Because yeah, he can go to the Angels with no pressure and hit 45 home runs and bat 270 with 130 RBIs. You think anybody on the market the following year with Vladimir Guerrero there gonna give him a long-term deal now, another year older? They don't believe in him. His clutch numbers, and again, we keep on talking about this over and over again. His clutch numbers, and anybody can go look at Chris's video, and I advise you to do so. He broke it down perfectly. And if you really want to look at the career numbers as a whole and really break down the clutch numbers, the runners in scoring position numbers, they were never good. Never. He is a stat pattern that every Met fan loved to talk about Lindor. Yet Lindor always had his clutch numbers throughout his entire career, and including the Mets. Even in the year that he had a bad year with the Mets in his first full season, 2021, his clutch numbers were outstanding. His overall numbers weren't great, but his clutch numbers were outstanding. Pete Alonso's issue is the pressurized situations. Look, I give him all the credit in the world. And the only reason why we're talking about Pete Alonso still possibly being a Met is because of what he did in the playoffs. And you can't forget that. But you also don't offer him stupid amount of years and money because of 1 or 2 at-bats. You just don't do it. The reason why we're talking about Pete Alonso is because he hit that home run in Milwaukee. There's no other reason. Because Met fans were done with him. There was not one Met fan that was confident when he came up with 2 runners on and down by 2. Like, nobody was confident. I don't care what anybody says. So we have to understand this, that there's a reason why no other team in baseball are offering him a long-term deal. And not even another team is probably offering him a 3-year deal, because he wouldn't counter offer with another similar deal that the Mets offered him if there was something out there that was close. Because anything close is not going to happen. He's not going to go to another team for the same deal that the Mets offered. It just doesn't make sense for him.
I think that there's a team like the Giants or the Angels that would go and give him a 3-year deal. But I think
would he go? That's the difference.
No, that's what I'm saying. So that's why I think that the exclusive deal to the Mets, whether they pulled their offer or not, which is a good thought process. It's kind of like an out of the box thought, which I didn't even think about. Right? Is that offer even still on the table for Pete Alonso? But I think that he knows that his best chance at being successful is in a Mets uniform, given their lineup. Because again, if he goes to LA, my whole entire point was that he's not going to bat 270. He's not going to hit 40 home runs there, because if you're going from the Mets lineup to the Angels lineup, and if there's no incentive to pitch to you in 2024, why would anybody pitch to you in an Angels uniform in 2025? Nobody would do it. So again, he wouldn't really get that opportunity. So he knows in the back of his head is that his golden ticket to potentially going back onto the market and getting a 4 or 5 year deal. Maybe even forget about 6 or 7, but another 4 or 5 year deal after this potential 3-year deal with an opt-out that he signs with the New York Mets is going to be with the Mets because they are going to put the best lineup out there of all the teams that could be still left on his market, whether it's the Giants or whether it's the Angels or even the Blue Jays for that matter, if they trade Vladdy this offseason, right? The Mets have the best lineup of those teams, and he knows that he will thrive because he won't have that much pressure on him solely to perform in a Mets uniform now that Soto's there and now that he has Vientos in year 2 and then anybody else that they put around him. Quite simple. This is what I'm saying. Pete Alonso will perform at his best in a quote-unquote contract year with an opt-out, if this is what it comes down to, in a Mets uniform, than anybody else offering him a similar deal. That's my point. So that's why I say Pete Alonso needs the Mets more than the Mets need Pete Alonso. So, but I also see people in the chat talking about, people want to replace Pete Alonso with Santander, who hit 235. Pete Alonso hit 240. He hit 240. I mean, what are we doing here? It's not that much of a difference.
Even if Santander hits 35 home runs or 32 home runs, which Pete Alonso basically hit, 36 last year? So that's not much of a difference. But again, go back to the clutch numbers. I guarantee you Santander has better numbers. And even if it is similar to what Pete Alonso did last year, what are we talking about? The same thing.
Should we bring it up?
Yeah, sure. If you want to bring it up, and while you bring it up, I'll say this. I'm not saying Santander is a better player than Pete Alonso. Pete Alonso's a better power hitter, but if you want to go just by last year, he wasn't, right? And by the way, Pete Alonso had more protection in this lineup and more guys around him that actually did well in Vientos, Lindor, and guys like that than you would say Santander was basically one of the best hitters in the Orioles lineup. So nobody really was protecting him. He was protecting other guys. So it's just,
I will say this, and I just want to be very clear. Again, I think the best thing for the Mets, if you want to maximize the offensive capability, given the power potential of Pete Alonso, I think Pete Alonso has more upside to him in a lineup than Santander. I will say that. I will stick to that because I've always been adamant about that. But for people saying that it is such a downgrade to go from Pete Alonso to Santander, that there's this astronomical gap, I don't buy into that. Would I like Pete Alonso back? Yes, I'm going to stick to that. But again, this is a next best case scenario. So runners in scoring position, they were kind of even. Let's see here. Okay. Yeah, I think Pete Alonso, the runners in scoring position, Pete Alonso had a better OPS than Anthony Santander. Let's look at the actual clutch number because that's what we're talking about.
I expect Pete Alonso to have a better OPS when he hits more home runs. In general.
Well, he did it in 2024.
This year, yeah, exactly, yeah.
All right, 2 outs, runners in scoring position. Santander's OPS 797, Alonso 771. Late and close. As per Baseball Reference, which I believe their definition of late and close is either being up or down by 1 in the 7th inning or greater, or later, I should say. Pete Alonso's OPS was 525 in that scenario, and Santander's was 1175.
Say that again. I'm sorry. I cut off for a second. I'm sorry.
Maybe I cut off. My computer's working overtime right now. Okay, can you hear me? Am I clear?
Sorry. Yeah, you're good.
In late and close category, right? In Baseball Reference, this is clutch value that Baseball Reference has in a situation where your team is either up or down by 1 run, and it's the 7th inning or later in a ball game. Pete Alonso hit 525, and Santander, his OPS was 1175.
That's
over 1100. Over 1100.
Insane. That's a huge difference. That's out of the league numbers for Pete Alonso compared to Santander. And again, do I think Santander is going to hit over 1,000 OPS in clutch late innings and maybe. But again, this has been a trend with Pete Alonso. So again, and I wanted to bring this up since we're on the Pete Alonso topic. Lou Co-op City, thank you for the super chat, by the way. He says Pete criticized Steve Cohen and Stearns on an interview for trading Scherzer. Well, Stearns wasn't a part of that. It was Billy Epler, but he did go out there and was pissed off with ownership and the front office that they traded guys at that deadline a few years ago, 2 years ago, or last year. Well, 2 years now. But yeah, I don't think that's a big deal because I understand Pete Alonso's frustration. He wants to win. So I don't think Steve Cohen is going to hold that against him. I just think the facts are the facts. The stats are the stats. The fact that Santander is more versatile than Pete Alonso, when you have Juan Soto in this lineup, when you have the potential of Vientos's power, you don't need as much power from Pete Alonso's power than you actually might think, right? If you believe that Lindor can hit 25 to 30, Soto hit 25 to 30 or 30 to 35 home runs, Vientos hit 25 to 30 home runs, you'll have more guys hitting 25 plus 20, around 25 home runs, basically all throughout your lineup. The necessity, the need for Pete Alonso's power, the potential power, because by the way, he didn't hit it last year. Let's go on that realm here, on that possibility. It's not necessarily needed in this lineup when you got more guys that can hit home runs. So the versatility might mean more to bring Anthony Santander in here because he could play multiple positions, 3 for that matter, left, right, and first base. Switch hitter, oh, by the way, even though he's obviously better on one side than the other, which most switch hitters are, but he is a switch hitter. That brings more versatility. You're not losing much. Even if Santander hits 29, 30 home runs, yeah, it might not be the possibility of hitting 40 home runs that Pete Alonso can hit. But again, you have more ways to go about it in your lineup overall. And that's where I think the Mets are looking at here and why Pete Alonso around the league isn't getting that much, Anthony Santander isn't getting 6-year deal offers all over the place. But I think that's a trend with a guy that, with Pete Alonso, that I just think that the Mets are on board with, where they're like, look, we want you back, but we want you back for this. And if you can get a guy that's more versatile than Pete Alonso and probably a few $1 million less per year, you're going to do it. And again, this is not saying that the Mets are likely to do that, right? I still think Pete Alonso is going to be here. But if you have to go into that or factor, you could see why the Mets could think of Anthony Santander as the better option. It's going to cost you less money. He plays more positions. Christus gave you the clutch numbers and the late numbers. It's not that close.
To go along with it though, Rob, I will say Pete Alonso in the playoffs, he's a much better performer, at least in the short sample size, because Santander's only had 5 games in his playoff career. So again, Pete Alonso had 16.
Okay.
So he's 16. So again, you get that sample factor too. I just want to say I understand. I will put this statement out there right now with the way that I view the situation. I still, because I've been saying it all offseason, I'm not going to go off of it. I would still rather see Pete Alonso in the Mets uniform for various reasons, right? Not the homegrown BS. I don't care about that, right? I'm talking about actually making the lineup as powerful as possible, because I do value the power a lot. I do. And also, Pete Alonso, given the playoff metrics, if the Mets get their way into the playoffs, you can generally, if all things remain consistent, rely on Pete Alonso in the playoffs. But what I will say is that to the people who are saying that Santander is a clear downgrade, I agree with what you're saying, Rob, 100%. There are certain advantages contractually, positionally, flexibility-wise that you can enjoy, more so with Santander than Pete Alonso on this roster. So it's not a far-fetched statement to want Santander on this team more so than Pete Alonso. I happen to want Pete Alonso more still. I will say that. I'll be very clear about that. I think people, with the way that I speak on, this, I think people get it misconstrued to, paint Pete Alonso as this horrible player. It's not true. He's not a horrible player. He's not lived up to the expectations over the past 2 seasons, and that's why we're stating this all with this whole contract situation, long-term versus short-term deal. But we have to be at least open to a different option if the Mets can't come to this middle ground agreement with Scott Boras and Pete Alonso. That's just a simple fact of the matter.
Yeah, and again, why were the Mets so successful last year? Was it because everybody in the lineup hit 35-plus home runs and we're having career years? No, not the lineup, right? Because Nimmo had a down season. Alonso had a down season. Multiple guys had down seasons. If it wasn't for Lindor and Vientos, who knows what Alvarez had bad season, right? What was it? It was the versatility factor that was available for the Mets, right? Jeff McNeil sucked. Iglesias came in. Bader sucked. Tyrone Taylor came in. Right, there was other options there that came in and helped this team. Even if you want to go to the bullpen, right? Buto was a starter. Now he was a bullpen arm. That was a huge deal for the bullpen, right? Bringing up Nunez, who, he was a bullpen arm, but the Mets signed him assigned him as a young guy as a starter. So there's versatility there. And the reason why the Mets were so good last year was because the versatility factor basically saved our asses from the disappointment of the first 2 months of the season, until the main guys started to get going. And that's the understanding here, where you have to understand why we're talking about this and why it could be a big deal, because of the fact the Mets have another option. And I think that's a big possibility, because if the Mets are true to their offer, 3 years for 90 and not budging on that, for whatever reason, Pete Alonso offered that exclusive deal to the Mets. We don't know the reason why. But if the Mets are firm on that offer and Pete Alonso does not take it, and you get Anthony Santander in here, I'm sorry. I'm not going to cry a tear. I'm not going to shed a tear. I'm just not. I'm not saying the Mets are going to be better, because you got to play the games on the field. But to tell me that they ain't more options and more ways to go about your lineup and your defensive alignment, you're crazy, because it's a fact. And again, this is both of us saying that we would rather have Pete Alonso. But Pete Alonso also has to accept the deal that the Mets actually offer. How many more times the Mets are going to play, this game with him? You can't do it. Santander is out there for the taking. You cannot wait for him to leave and go elsewhere, because now the Mets are going to have to, fall over and say, all right, Pete, we have to give you what you want. And that's the issue. That's what the Mets don't want to do. They don't want to have their backs against the wall. And that's where I think the Mets are with the Pete Alonso situation. But hopefully soon we get this, this comes to a head and this gets finished, because I'm sick of talking about Pete Alonso. The next time I want to talk about Pete Alonso is when we're talking about the final roster and the lineup in our season preview. That's when I want to talk about it. Other than
or
that,
at least a live stream when he signs for whatever deal.
Yeah, exactly. Or signs with the Angels.
I think it'll be soon. To be honest with you. I think that if he's going to be a Met, it's going to be soon. I'm talking about, I don't know about today is ambitious. I said it could be by the end of the weekend, but I think within the next couple of days for sure that, if we heard that this, offer was given, by Alonso to the Mets, I think if the Mets are actually serious, this resolution is going to come soon. And if they're not, then they're going to pivot strong and they're going to get another bat, whoever it is.
I agree. All right. So the next topic, Roki Sasaki, there isn't really much to talk about. We all want him, right? We know he's got an electric arm. He's young. He's going to be cheap, right? Everybody could use him. There isn't much to say except let's wait until the 15th when he can officially sign, when he will officially or has the opportunity to officially sign, with more teams having, IAF money and all that. I don't have nothing else to say except I want him. I'm not confident in the Mets getting him. But again, crazier things have happened, Chris. And, that's all we can hope for is just him to choose us.
He's not coming here. Hey, he's not coming here. He's not coming here. Listen, I would love it, but he's not coming here. So this is why I talked about Flaherty on my channel this morning. Like, he's Flaherty is no Roki Sasaki, he's no Corbin Burns, but this is the next best guy if you don't want to give up any trade assets to get another pitcher at the front of your rotation, knowing that Sasaki's not coming here. Because
Flaherty doesn't have a pick connected to him.
I don't know if he's got the QO. I don't think so.
No, because he was traded.
Yeah, I mean, he was traded too. And then also, again,
also another thing that the Mets love. No picks connected. Yeah.
And if Sasaki's a Dodger, I mean, they have no use for Flaherty at this point. That rotation is full, especially with the guys coming back from injury. So, again, I think that one thing that I do want to talk about, and we can kind of fill this time in talking about this, because I did see a comment about this earlier in the live chat here, and I also saw someone comment this, and there's a discussion in the comment section under my recent video, was this whole BS that's being thrown out there by non-verified outlets talking about the fit of a trade between the Mets and the Yankees, a swap for Jeff McNeil and Marcus Stroman.
God, no.
It is not happening, ladies and gentlemen. Let me be the first one to tell you that this is Yankees propaganda. Does it seem fishy to everybody or anybody that the Yankees were rumored to have interest in Luis Arias? And then Andy Martino comes out and says, okay, well, the Yankees aren't actually pursuing Luis Arias. He seems more like a fit for the New York Mets. Oh, but by the way, now we can go ahead and transition into targeting a similar ball player offensively to Luis Arias and Jeff McNeil. Give me a break. Give me a break. It's not happening. The Yankees would be lucky to find any team in this league that would take the $18 million contract hit of Marcus Stroman. I'm not saying Stroman doesn't have anything to offer, on the field for a team around this league. And I'm not even talking about, the burnt bridges that, he kind of went down that path after he left the New York Mets and the things that he had to say about the New York Mets. I'm not even talking about that. That's not even like in this realm of discussion. I'm talking about strictly on-field performance-wise. I take a look at a strikeout rate reducing itself to just over 16% for Marcus Stroman, which is well below league average. It's not a good fit. It's not. And the money doesn't really work with the years that Jeff McNeil has attached on his contract. Maybe the Yankees take that on. It's similar AAV, but again, not the years. I think Stroman has a vesting option on his contract if he hits certain incentives for the 2026 season. But again, why are we talking about? I brought it up, but I'm only talking
Yankee
about
propaganda.
this.
It is Yankee propaganda. But here's the thing: the Yankees are trying to get rid of most of the contract of Stroman. So for anybody to talk about McNeil and Stroman in a deal makes no sense for the Yankees. Yeah, position-wise, yes, it makes a lot of sense. But they're taking on almost similar money for Jeff McNeil. I mean, yeah, they could do that because it fills their position, but the Mets aren't going to do that. Like, I wouldn't take Marcus Stroman if the Yankees paid every penny for the rest of time for Marcus Stroman. I don't want Marcus Stroman. He burns bridges. He's a total loof. He's not even good enough to have the mouth that he has, at least not anymore. So, and people act like he's good. If he was good, the Yankees would still want him in their rotation. They don't want him. They'd rather have Clark Schmidt. They'd rather have Luis Gil. They don't want Stroman. Like, that's a fact. So I'm not even concerned about it. Like, yeah, it fills the need for the Yankees, but what does it do for the Mets? It gives you a pitcher that was worse than Frankie Montas last year. I mean, I'd rather have Clay Holmes in a rotation than Marcus Stroman. Like, and that's something that I don't want in Clay Holmes in a rotation. There's more potential that Clay Holmes could be better than Stroman can give you any single day, right? He's a ground ball pitcher, which is great at Citi Field, but he gives up a ton of runs. He doesn't strike out anybody. He relies on guys hitting the ball on the ground, but it wasn't successful over the last couple of seasons. It hasn't been good at all. So it doesn't make sense for the Mets. They're taking on a little bit more money, even if the Yankees pay $4 or $5 million and it evens out the McNeil and Stroman salary. It's not beneficial enough for the Mets to do that. I'd rather sign Flaherty for $3-4 million more per year, knowing that Flaherty can give me better numbers, and I think he's a better pitcher overall. So, and he's younger. So I'd rather do that. So it's Yankee propaganda. It is probably Yankee content creators bringing it up more than anybody else. Actually, I was watching one of the Yankees. I forgot who it was. It just popped up on my one of my YouTube feeds, and I was looking at it, and they were talking about it. Like every Yankee person reporter, content creator are talking about this because they're trying to get Stroman off the team. They know they can't get a second baseman or an infielder in here that costs money unless they shed that payroll from Stroman, that money from Stroman, and nobody's going to take Stroman unless you pay almost all that money, and it doesn't benefit the Yankees to do that because they got to bring in somebody for more money or similar money, and they're only a few $1,000,000 under that luxury tax. So I just don't see it. And when it comes to the Mets, if they do that, Stern should be fired. That's just stupid business. It really is. Stroman isn't good anymore. He's got a big mouth. He thinks he's still 25 years old with the Blue Jays, and he's not. Unfortunately, because he's a New York person, it was cool when he got traded to the Mets, but he's just not good anymore. His strikeout rate is non-existent. His ground ball rate is still there, but when you don't strike out anybody, you rely way too much on contact, and it just doesn't benefit you in this day and age of baseball, unfortunately. So that's a no. That is absolutely
sorry to go down that whole path of Marcus Stroman. I wanted to say that that's not happening.
Yeah. Again, so the rookie Sasaki topic is kind of just, we both said no, and it's pointless to go into details unless the Mets sign. Like, then we can really go into detail. But elite bullpen, that's a possibility because of Tanner Scott and the potential of the Mets actually going at, again, when Andy Martino says something positive about the Mets, when he reports something, listen to it. Anytime it's negative, it's probably wrong because he's just a Yankee shill. But when there's positive reports from Andy Martino in regard to a player and the Mets connection, it's probably almost true, if not very true. The Tanner Scott situation makes so much sense if the Mets are going to leave the starting rotation the way it is. Just make a better bullpen. And knowing that the Mets might actually spend closer type money on Tanner Scott gets me excited because I already talked about the bullpen right now with Buto, Nunez, Garrett, and Diaz. It's not terrible. It's pretty good. You add Tanner Scott to that, you have one of the best bullpens in baseball. And that's not including if you bring in Robinson or Stanek as well. Either one of those guys in a long man. I think it would be that's elite bullpen in my opinion, Chris.
And that's why I was kind of hesitant to say, the Mets are going to go out there and get two big bats, being Santander and Alonso, right? Because you still need, if these Tanner Scott reports are true, you still need to allocate $18 to $20 million, you would think, to bring this guy in the doors. And again, if the Mets aren't concerned with the actual payroll hit, then you can do everything or anything you really want. Go get the two big bats, go get Tanner Scott and Robertson, but I don't think the Mets are going to operate in that capacity, right? I don't think they're going to do that. But what I will say is that, again, if they're not interested in Flaherty, they're not interested in, any other starting pitcher outside of Sasaki, and Sasaki chooses elsewhere to go, the next best option is to just make this bullpen elite, like you just said.
Yep.
And Tanner Scott does that.
It shortens the game.
Yeah, right. Correct. Absolutely. And you're right. This bullpen, with the personnel that is currently on this roster, it's a great starting point.
Yep.
It's a great starting point in terms of the actual stuff and the names that the Mets have. You add Tanner Scott into that mix, you add another guy, a righty, presumably, whether it's Robertson, whether it's a guy like, Canley or whoever else.
Yeah.
You're cooking. You're absolutely cooking. And, the other part of this is that, Diaz, we know he has an opt-out on his contract. He's probably going to opt into it. We talked about this last hot stove. It's a player option. He's probably going to opt into it because he's not going to see that kind of money elsewhere. He's not. But, you also have another closer, a closing option, not needing to rely if Edwin Diaz is not cutting it. We saw at one point before he went on the IL, he wasn't cutting it in the beginning of the season.
Yeah.
And an IL stint really helped him out But in that time period, the Mets were like, what do we do at the closer spot? We don't have anybody. This is before Daniel Nunez was even a thing for the Mets in 2024. Now they have an option to bring in, whether you're platooning these guys, whether you like the matchups in the 8th inning for Diaz more so than Tanner Scott, and you need to flip them. That is that's just like something that a manager dreams of if you're Carlos Mendoza. Late in the ball game, he has every single tool at his disposal at that point if the Mets offense gives them the lead.
Yep.
So I agree. Go get Tanner Scott 100%. I'm still going to fight you on the fact that the Mets are willing to give a 4-year deal to him. I'm not confident in that. But you know what? Maybe they see Edwin Diaz and they're speculating that he wants to opt out, or again, I don't see it's likely, but again, you have to think about all these scenarios if you're president of baseball operations and David Stearns. But also, if you give him a 4-year deal, I think that last year of the Tanner Scott contract would be him being the closer, because I think Edwin Diaz, if he opts in, only has 3 more years left on his deal to begin with. So there's some overlap there.
Yeah.
So there's some overlap there, if I'm not mistaken. So it makes total sense. And then again, the thing that allows you to do is that Clay Holmes is a starter, and that provides him.
Well, I'd be okay with that at that point.
Yeah, right, exactly. Exactly. So, well, and that's why I would like another starting pitcher, because again, if you have Clay Holmes, Tanner Scott, and Edwin Diaz in that bullpen, oh my goodness.
I mean, I can go 4 innings every day. Like, we'd be fine.
And nobody would bat an eye. Nobody would complain at that point, right?
But I do think, Chris, with the Diaz situation last year, and again, it's another year after the knee injury, so he might be a lot more healthier and a lot more confident in that knee, and that's probably the reason why I think he struggled as well, because he wasn't confident in the knee, and he did get better later on, and we know what happened in certain times at the end of the year. But again, he was better. I do think they want that other option that can I'm not gonna say guarantee victories or saves, but somebody that you feel confident in. As much as Nunez, I would be okay with, or Buto, I'm still not. I still don't believe that the Mets want to do that. They don't want a situation like last year. You can't have a situation like last year again this year and have nobody to fill that role that you feel confident in. And even if you have a guy like Buto, Nunez, or Garrett for that matter, that you can throw in a closer role for a couple of weeks, that hurts your bullpen depth-wise, because now you got to bring somebody else in that you probably don't have no confidence in, and that hurts your bullpen overall. You bring in Tanner Scott, it solves all that. Now, you can't predict injuries. If you have another late in injury season with a lot of bullpen arms, you can't do nothing about that. But being as it can be healthy, you don't have to worry about that. And that's the thing. And that's why I think the Andy Martino report, because Andy Martino reported that and said that, tells me that there's a little bit more, friction in that whole conversation with the connection with Tanner Scott and the New York Mets. And I think Bleacher Report, Walkoff also put something out there, tweeted out there that the Mets, Tanner Scott 4 for 80, and they had the potential team, and it said the Mets. Like, it's out there, and it's been reported by multiple, sources now, that they see that more likely now as, say, even 3 weeks ago. So something's going on there, and maybe it is not a 4-year deal, because you would think somebody would want Tanner Scott for a 4-year deal as their closer, especially a team that might be contending. Maybe the Mets can get him on a 3-year deal. Shit, you know what I would do? I would give him a 4-year deal and give him an opt-out after the first year. I would do it.
It's possible.
Yeah, it's expensive, but you know what? If you're not going to spend the money in the starting rotation, do it in the bullpen and do it with the bats. And let's go to war with it in 2025, in my opinion.
There's so many. I'm looking at this reliever market. It's just so plentiful that I'm not even panicked. Like, even if the Mets don't get Tanner Scott, I'm not panicking. You see, I have this list right here. David Robertson, right? Carlos Estevez, who's probably the second best option in terms of electricity. I know that he struggled in the Phillies uniform, especially in the playoffs against the Mets. But again, the trajectory that he was, going down in an Angels uniform before that trade was awesome. So Carlos Estevez is out there. AJ Minter, who I've been a very big proponent of this entire offseason. You can take a look at like 2 months ago in one of the videos that I did, one of my very first offseason videos of the bullpen, I talked about AJ Minter being that cheaper option if the Mets are not in play for a guy like Tanner Scott. Tommy Canley is out there. Kyle Finnegan, Brooks Raley, who's probably going to be looking at a second half return that you could stash if you're the New York Mets on a cheap 1-year deal. Who else? Stanek is out there. Colin Poche is out there. I like Colin Poche a lot if, other lefties are not available for the Mets. So there's names out there to be had, and it's very plentiful. So I would not panic in the bullpen category if I were the New York Mets. But again, none of those names I just mentioned are as electric and are as solidified as Tanner Scott and what he's put up in the last 2 years. And if the Mets get Tanner Scott to go along with Edwin Diaz, it's lights out in the 8th and 9th inning.
Yeah, I'll be very excited about. Again, I'm not panicking about the bullpen. I think Stearns is going to cook in the bullpen, regardless if it's Tanner Scott or not. I think we'll be fine because we already mentioned the names that are already in the Mets bullpen, which is really good. We got to remember that Buto broke down, Nunez got hurt, and Garrett basically was overused a ton. And Diaz didn't have a great season coming back from the knee injury. So there's a lot of things there. But again, I think you go after Tanner Scott there, but I'm not panicking with the bullpen. I panic with starting pitching a little bit, but hey, give me Santander and Alonso, and I can shut up about it a little bit. But all right, so before we get to the rapid fire at the end, let's just do a quick recap. Santander and Flaherty are willing to take short-term deals, which automatically put the Mets on notice about them potentially going after those guys. Santander could be more likely sooner than the Flaherty situation, just based on a Sasaki decision in a couple of days, hopefully in a couple of days. Pete Alonso obviously made an exclusive offer to the Mets, 3 years with multiple opt-outs. We're not sure if the Mets offer is still on the table for 3 for $90. That is yet to be determined. Do we believe the Mets are going to eventually sign Pete Alonso? We both said yes. So we'll see if that's going to continue. The Roki Sasaki situation is what it is. If he chooses us, great. We're all happy. If he doesn't, we're not shocked. That's basically the roundup when it comes to Sasaki. And the bullpen, the bullpen that we mentioned, Tanner Scott makes this bullpen elite. And if you bring in anybody else, Robinson, Canley, Stanek, it just adds to the elite part of the bullpen. And, of course, you're going to need a long man. There's just so many options there. And, look, Tanner Scott's a left-hander, so you got a left-hander in the bullpen if you need him. Obviously you might want another one, but, again, I'm not going to cry if you only got Tanner Scott as the lone lefty in the bullpen. So rapid-fire time, I think it's a very simple rapid-fire for me. Question, I've had it ready to go from the beginning. Do the Mets sign Anthony Santander on a short-term deal?
I'm going to say no. I'm going to say no. Unfortunately. As much as I would like for that to happen, I think that the bat is going to be Alonso. And then we're probably looking at a lesser bat, maybe a guy like Jesse Winker to round out the corner outfield and then platoon. I just don't think that, with the payroll outlook that I mentioned earlier in this stream, I don't think that the two big name bats is gonna be the route that the Mets take. But if that's not the route the Mets take, Tanner Scott better be in a Mets uniform.
I agree.
That is the give and take scenario and situation that we're talking about right here. So I don't think Anthony Santander is going to be a Met. I think it's going to be Pete Alonso. I think we'll see this Pete Alonso situation resolve itself in the next couple of weeks. I still think that there's a bat in addition to Pete Alonso that the Mets will pursue. I just don't think the name is going to be Anthony Santander. Okay. So that's what I think. My rapid fire question to you is, we just both said, I think that, Pete Alonso is going to be a New York Met. What is the final number on the AAV that he gets from the Mets?
I'm going to go $35 million per. I think the Mets are not going to concern themselves too much with the AAV. I think at this point, they have to get it done or just move on. So I think it's going to happen probably after Monday, after football playoffs is, well on to the next round. I think Tuesday is probably going to be the day we're going to hear a lot about Pete Alonso. It just makes sense at this point. Don't make the news during football Sunday when nobody gives a damn about baseball, or at least we would, but most people don't. And Monday, you still got a night game, unless Monday morning, Monday afternoon, it might happen. But I think Monday early morning or afternoon, or Tuesday, Pete Alonso is going to sign. I think it's going to be for $35 million per year, 3 years with the multiple opt-outs. I think the Mets are going to budge a little bit because I just think they want it done. And maybe if they're slowly pivoting to Anthony Santander and they don't like what they're hearing number-wise for Santander, they'll just stick with what they know in Pete Alonso. And $35 million, I think it's it's just a give and take at this point. And I think they're just fed up and saying, let's just get him.
I'll say 3 years, 98 million, which is around $32 million per year. That's what I'll say for.
Yeah, and again, I'd be okay with that. Again, I'm not going to go crazy if Pete Alonso is a Met. It is what it is. You got Juan Soto in here. You hope you have a healthy Nimmo with Lindor, with Vientos. I think would be perfectly fine. I just want, close to murderer's row as you can and go with a elite bullpen in that situation. So, all right, guys. So episode 25, Mets Hot Stove is in the books. I think the football game just started. So enjoy football Sunday, guys. Thank you for tuning into a special time slot for Mets Hot Stove. We just wanted to get it done before the football, and we both had things to do, so we just get it out of the way today. And if any breaking news, I guess one of us or both of us will come on with some sign-ins for the New York Mets, hopefully very soon. With that said, guys, have a great rest of your day. Enjoy your football Sunday. Let's go Mets, and we'll see you next time on the Hot Stove Show. Have a good day, guys. Let's go Mets.
Let's go Mets.
Dead of night, full of echo. Concrete jungle, dreams bust to grow. Mets in the air, chase glory, no fear. Broken backs, but hearts steer clear.